Welcome to Weaving the Blanket, stories of faith, sacrifice, martyrdom, and the emancipation of the Evangelical Methodist Church in Bolivia. This is Season 4, The Making of Saints and Martyrs, and Episode 2, Life in Sapecho, on $80 to $160 a month. I asked Ken, why did you go as an IEMB pastor and live on $960 a year instead of going as a missionary from GBGM and get $10,000 to $20,000 a year and health and life insurance, retirement, and college scholarship for your kids, etc.?
We have frequently said there's a thin line between faith and foolishness, and we have been on both sides of that line. And in this sense, we are pure idealists, and we thought it was a fair thing, rather than the missionary going in and building an American-style house and living at a different level, that we thought it important that we identify with the people, that we live it as much as possible. You have to use good sense when it comes to your health, and especially when you have your family with you and all that.
Yeah.
That we just made the commitment among ourselves that we were going to live at the level of the people we went to work with. And this was part of our inner dynamic, and the barriers between cultures would be lessened. But we also found out there is another thing to consider, that if you become so native and live at their level, you can get to the point where they say they can't help us, they're no better than we are. But when we start out living in a bamboo shack that they helped us to build, we could not have survived in the jungle otherwise.
Sapecho had only been settled 16 years earlier, cut out of the jungle. There wasn't a single brick or wood home in the village. Homes were made of bamboo and thatch and dirt floor. Once the Corsons got to kilometer 73, the church started to build a hut for their new pastor and his family. And the Corsons would walk the 10 miles each way every weekend to lead worship. When the community started to build their house, Ken would stay overnight some with his sons Chris and Tom, spending the night at the church, and then help build the bamboo room. The home they were building was just like everybody else's in town. Bamboo poles stuck in the ground as closely together as possible, but still allowed people to see into their home through the cracks. The roof was made of thatch. When they first moved in, there was only a blanket for the door, but that didn't keep the chickens out. So as soon as they could, they got some wood for a carpenter to make them a door. The odd thing is that the cheapest wood they could find was mahogany. So with a bamboo hut, they had a mahogany door. Here is Sarah's description of the bamboo home the church built for them. When Sarah says woven palm leaf mats, she means woven palm leaves attached to bamboo poles stuck into the dirt floor to give a thin visual wall between the, quote, the different rooms. The one-room bamboo hut was only 18 to 20 feet square.
And we had one room. We had put some little mats, some woven out of palm leaves, between the boys and the girls and Ken and me. But that one room and our bedroom, and the mat didn't cover the whole wall. It just gave us a little bit of privacy, you know. And our bedroom had 2 chairs and Ken's desk and a little tiny bookshelf, and that's the furniture, you know. So right at the foot of our bed was where there was the 2 chairs. We had very few candles, and we wouldn't get any more till the next peddler came through. And we'd sometimes give out and be totally out of light at night. So we wouldn't burn more than one at a time. We were in a struggle to survive. I had to wash by hand in the creek, and thanks to Ken, he helped me. He made all the kids wash their own clothes, and he washed his. And we'd have to go every day and wash the clothes from the day before, have enough to keep clean, you know.
The people who lived in Sapecho were not indigenous people who had lived in the jungle for generations. They were Aymara farmers from the Altiplano and Quechua farmers from the mountainous regions around Cochabamba. They knew nothing about to hunt for wild game in the jungle to get protein to eat. So the people of Sapecho ate primarily starches and carbohydrates. Sarah talked about how precious any protein was that they could get.
And we to eat we had to. It was hard to find something to cook, and I'd have to walk sometimes 2 or 3 miles seeing who had an egg to sell, or a piece of yuca or something. And actually, I had brought some baking powder to make bread, but I didn't have an oven. I couldn't use it, but I used the baking powder. If I got like 3 eggs, well, I'd put baking powder in that, beat them up in the eggs so they'd foam up a little more, and then we'd all get a bite of protein, all 6 of us. And, it was a struggle to survive, and then the kids would get sick, and they'd get infections where they'd scratch mosquito bites, and then not only my kids, it was the neighbors. They were at my door every minute. Oh, do you have this? Do you have any pig's toenails? Well, no. When we killed our last pig, were we supposed to save the toenails, or do you mean do I clip my pig's toenails? And they said, no, did you save them from the last time? No, I didn't. What would I save them for? Oh, that's vitamins, And my wife had a baby and she's not recuperating. I wanted some pig's toenails ground up, to put in some water for her to drink. Well, maybe that's right, because Jello's made out of cow's hooves, But all of these kind of things, our day was just so packed full.
Running to the grocery store was...
We didn't have a vehicle, of course, on $80 a month. And most of the Bolivian pastors didn't. They had to walk. I was in a lot better shape than I am now. And 10 miles to the river. From the river was the shopping center, which was 3 huts on stilts, bamboo huts, what you'd call it, you can see. But that's where we could get some things that we couldn't get. In Sapecho, we could mainly get penny candy and just a few things. That Coca-Cola you could always get.
The Corsons, of course, had more education than their neighbors, and they knew that you just didn't eat to fill up, you had to have protein. A lot of homesteaders had no money, none at all. They simply bartered for everything they needed. The Corsons were better off than some of the homesteaders. They would save out of that $80 a month enough to buy a case of tuna or something to get protein. That way, at least twice a week, they would have some protein, but mostly they ate carbs like rice and potatoes.
The Corsons had agreed to live on a Bolivian pastor's salary, which was only $80 a month at the time. But the Alta Beni was the furthest outpost the Methodists had into the jungle. And the leadership of the IEMB became concerned that the Corsons would be unduly stressed to live in such an isolated place as that. So they asked Sarah to pastor the Palos Blancos church 7 miles past Sapecho, which meant that she too would get an $80 salary. This was an unexpected blessing, both because Sarah loved the work with the Palos Blancos people and also because it was much easier to provide for their children on $160 a month instead of $80 a month. But that is still less than $2,000 a year. $2,000 a year.
There was no high school, but there was a school for up to 4th grade. They sent their daughter, Karen, who had just turned 11 and would have been a 7th grader, to attend the 4th grade class. Karen already knew Spanish, as did all of the Corson kids from their time in Puerto Rico. They realized the school would be a great place for her to learn Bolivian history and culture, but mainly she went for social reasons, to meet and develop friends among the local kids. While it was a 4th grade education, it was the top grade taught, and there were children of all ages in the class. Before they left Alabama, the local schools gave each of the kids all the books they needed for the next 2 years of their education. The administration said they would give the Corson children the standardized test when they returned to Alabama, and if they passed the standardized test and they could do work at the appropriate level when they returned, the administration could move the children up 2 grades that they had missed while they were in Bolivia. But if they failed the test, they would have to go back a grade or 2 behind their friends. Sarah planned on doing homeschooling. This was before there was such a thing called homeschooling. But the actual reality is that she never finished one single class with the children over those 2 years. She had to leave the kids with the books because she had to go and help someone. This woman was in childbirth and there were no doctors, or this one had just cut his thumb off with
A machete.
just constant emergence. It was like it was on the frontier of the United States. Sarah's 2 daughters were scared to death that they were going to be held back and left behind by their friends. So they studied awfully hard. They probably studied harder and learned more than if they had stayed in Alabama. But the boys, the boys were so happy they didn't have to go to regular classes. And when the Corsons went back to Alabama, the boys passed the language and history and other subjects, but they were behind in mathematics. But the school generously moved them up 2 grades as long as the parents agreed to hire some math tutors to get them caught up the first year they got back. The kids did especially well in history and geography. A missionary had left behind a set of encyclopedias, and since there was no TV or radio, reading the encyclopedias by candlelight was the main evening event for the children. That and playing with the other local children.
And singing as Chris played the guitar.
But it was hard on the kids, especially that first year.
One of our boys said to us, made us uneasy because he'd say, I wish I had sane parents. I've got these weirdos that take me down in a jungle. Said, when I get married and have children, I will really know how to give them the American lifestyle. We were afraid they would blame God for them, But it didn't happen that way. We prayed so much, and God really heard our prayer. Now you can ask, one of my 4 kids what was the happiest time of their life, and everyone loves me, Sapecho. And they'll say, it wasn't the easiest time, but it's the time when we felt more meaning and purpose. Even though we were kids, we could do something to help people because we could read.
When they were staying with Bob Caulfield in Kilometer 73, Bob told the Corsons that they would meet an extraordinary family, the Paredes. Abdon Paredes was an active Methodist, and in fact, the church met in his home until they could construct a bamboo hut for the church. However, Bob said that Abdon had a cousin who was the black sheep of the family. His name was Ben Amin, and he'd become a communist. He was an atheist, and he hated the church. And he will be committed to stop any project you do and may even threaten your lives. Caulfield's told him to be very careful around this guy. So they said they would. Within the first few months, they had their first encounter with this man who hated Christians and especially hated Americans, Ben Amin Paredes, better known as Ben Ho. The next week, we will learn about this intense man, Ben Ho Paredes. To hear more of my interview with Sora Corson, go to www.weavingtheblanket.com and scroll down to the list of episodes and click on Dig Deeper for the episode S3E2, Ken and Sarah Corson, Life in Sapecho, on $80 a day. You will also find there where you can purchase Sarah's autobiography, Risking Everything, and information about CFAT, the nonprofit organizations the Corsons started in Alabama that's still active today. CFAT, S-I-F-A-T, stands for Servants in Faith and Technology. See you next week.